Welcome everybody to our VETtalks series. I think this is about the fourth episode in the series, and today we're going to be looking at governing for quality and risk and looking at in detail at Standard 4 in the new standards for RTOs 2025, and looking at how what practical systems and evidence your RTO needs to collect and collate to be able to show that performance against those standards. It's going to be lots of fun. I'm joined today by Javier Amaro from Insources, and Javier has a wealth of experience in the vet sector. He has, I believe, I read your profile, Javier, I think it was over 24 years experience in vet, and that might be more than that since your profile was last updated. Obviously, he's been all around the vet sector. Javier is responsible for National Vet Conference, which is coming up in March. He's the CEO of Insources. I believe Insources also has an RTO as well. Is that right, Javier?
Yeah. Correct. Yeah.
So he's been around a long time. He's an expert in his field, and I'm really excited to be joined by Javier today to be helping us out to look at governance and how your RTO can thrive under the new standards in the under the new governance requirements. So thanks, Javier. Do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself? I've given you a brief introduction, but maybe you can give us a little bit about yourself.
Thank you, Scott. Yeah, look, you basically mentioned all the important parts. I have been working, well, firstly, we manage an RTO that's been registered since year 2000. We focus on compliance. We deliver diploma quality auditing and leadership management and training for basically leaders in the vet sector. And I have worked as a consultant, as an auditor. I also trained the TAA, TAE, and have been involved with the vet sector at very different levels. So it's a pleasure for me to be here, and I'm glad that we have this opportunity to share with so many people. So I'm sure it's going to be a really good webinar where we all going to learn something as well.
Awesome. Thanks, Javier. Thanks for the introduction there. So, yeah, look, the new self-assurance model puts a lot of onus on the RTO leadership team to ensure that they've got the right governance model and processes in place. It's in this session, what we want to do is look at the practical things that you can do within your RTO to ensure that you've got not just ticking boxes, but you actually have all the systems and processes, policies, procedures, and implemented and working for you within your RTO to make sure that not only are you meeting the standards for RTOs, but actually that you're running a really well-functioning RTO that's thriving and doing really well. So let's get into it. And before we get started, I'm just going to move something out to the side here that you can't see, and we're going to get into the slides. So first of all, before we get started, we'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land and waterways throughout Australia. We would like to show our respect to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander cultures and to elders past, present, and emerging. We're going to have a look at all of governance standard, the governance standard 4 in this session. So we're going to start by first having a look at the current state of governance in vet, and then we'll start to move on through leadership and your staff capability and how you can the tips and tricks for making sure that you've got the right processes and procedures in place for that. Continuous improvement, risk management at standard 4.3, and then we'll look at a practical governance meeting agenda that you might want to implement within your organization. And then finally, we'll move on to some questions. So if you do have questions, please just as you think of them, throw them into the chat. I've got Harmony here with me today. Hi, Harmony. She's waving, she's on mute. So yeah, Harmony will be collecting and collating your questions for a Q&A session at the end. So thanks for helping us out there, Harmony. Yeah, so keep those questions coming. I also wanted to let you know that we will be providing everyone in the session a certificate of attendance for your professional development records as well. So that will come to you with the recording of the session as well via your email after the session. So look out for that and make sure you put that in your PD records. So let's get into it. I wanted to start off by just touching on the term governance and what it means. So the sort of formal definition of governance is a formal structure of authority and accountability that consists of roles. So in a medium RTO, that might be your exec management team. In a larger organization, it might be board of directors or committees. Obviously, those roles vary based on the size of your organization. The official policies, or sorry, the policies or the official rules and guidelines that guide your organization. And lastly, processes, so the established procedures for decision-making, risk management, and performance oversight. So those three things together form what we'd term governance. And these elements dictate your how your organization is legally and ethically controlled and directed. So the emphasis in the new standards is all about leadership and obviously ensuring that you have the formal structures, governance structures in place to manage risk within your organization. If we look at the current state of governance, it's looking a little bit grim, to be honest. If you look at initial registration applications rejected, last year there was 38. This year there's 85. There's 32 renewal applications refused, and a lot more RTOs chose not to renew. But I think the most, I guess, concerning statistic in ASQA's 24-25 annual report was the non-compliance findings being at 78% of RTOs on performance assessment were non-compliance. So I don't know whether that means ASQA RTOs are doing anything less, or our auditor is our ASQA, our regulator, is has lifted the bar in terms of their expectations of RTOs. But either way, I think that statistic shows that from a governance perspective, RTOs really are going to need to lift their game and make sure they've got the right systems and processes in place to ensure that they're not you're not in that statistic. Obviously, yeah, there's been a lot of ASQA's been really busy over the last 12 months. 116 site visits, 85 amber letters for Cricos RTOs, 122 compliance practice complaints. Yeah, many tip-offs through the tip-off line. Lots of matters currently under investigation, over 200 matters or RTOs currently being investigated, and 44 of those investigations, interestingly, are from organizations that aren't RTOs, that are, I guess, pretending to be RTOs. So the stats are quite bad from a governance perspective, I would say. And so I think it's important to start here, because what we want to look at today is how to avoid being one of those statistics, and looking at ways that you can navigate the new standards and ensure that you've got the people and the processes in place to stay strong and resilient and sustainable in the new environment. So that leads me into the right leadership team, and obviously the right leadership team is critical for navigating this new governance landscape. It's critical that you have the right leadership team in place. So in a small RTO, governance is typically the role of the exec team. The competency, character, and integrity of this team is critical to the success of your RTO and the ability to comply with the leadership requirements under 4.1. So Javier, can you help us out just with taking us through from some of the things that RTOs need to consider to comply with the performance indicator 4.1A, which is all about fit and proper people? Like what do we need to do to make sure that our leadership team meet the requirements for fit and proper leadership?
Sure. If you don't mind, I would like to look at a more broader analysis first, because those statistics that they're showing that they're really, you know, shocking, and the damage that can have been making to our system are significant, because, you know, publishing these numbers is actually a trust crisis for the vet sector, and that could be really dangerous for us as a sector, you know. And I think one of you know, that previous slide that you show about the leadership team, it is crucial, because for too long perhaps RTOs focusing on just having a good system, you know, a set of policies and procedures, and when the time of the auditor comes, the auditor would just look at those procedures, and if they tick the boxes, then we are okay. You're talking about what is ASCO doing differently? Well, ASCO is taking a more, you know, broader approach in 360, if you want, degrees approach to compliance. And it's important to understand that having a system is important, you know, critical, you know, special, because you want to ensure that people knows what is the right thing to do, and what is the wrong thing to do. So having policies that demonstrate your commitment and your understanding of the standards is great. Having procedures that transform that in operational processes is great. Even you can have, you know, work instructions that are more detailed. But this is just a system. We need a strong leadership that will implement the system, that will monitor that that system is actually achieving the right results, that is taking actions in improving the system, that is taking action in rectification, that is taking even sometimes disciplinary actions in order to ensure that our team continue to perform in a cohesive way and to provide a quality system. So governance is that really broad concept that it not only includes a system, but that system has to be alive and can only be made alive by that leadership team. Now, let's start with the black and white. The first thing is to ensure that our leaders do meet the fit and proper person, you know, which has been updated in a year and a half, almost 2 years ago, and it's quite important that we ensure that the people that are going to lead our RTO are able to pass that fit and proper person test. Now, of course, we don't, you know, we can't be on top of every leader in our or governing person, as Asco mentioned, at all times. So it might be a good idea to ask our leaders to sign that fit and proper person requirement form every year as a self-declaration of it. And as you mentioned in this slide, verify the history of that person or anyone that's going to join the team in terms of the previous history in the vet sector. So we need the person that it is fit and proper, but we need the right person that has enough experience in managing education, vocational, technical education, And we need the right person also that has the right connections with the industry. And I think those are the three key points here. Now we're talking about governance, and I think Scott, is quite important that we got people that have some kind of experience at a corporate governance, and also an understanding on managing finance at that corporate level that is quite important today.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, and I would concur with that. There's a bigger emphasis in the standards about financial governance and making sure that you've got capable people that have the skills to be able to, I guess, manage an organization at that level. So making sure you've got those checks and balances in place on recruitment, or even, you know, after recruitment, you should make sure that you've assessed the skills of your team, and that your team has the necessary skills, qualifications, and experience to be working within the role that they're working in within your organization. So if you haven't got the evidence currently for your leadership team, that's something that you want to go and, you know, collate and make sure that you've got that, and that there's no gaps. And so you can, you know, truly say that you've got the right capability, and that you've also got the right that those people have the right integrity and character and meet the fit and proper requirements. So background checks, police checks, those types of things are also really important, right? Because, you know, people might have a history that you need to be aware of. So I'll just jump through this. I think this next slide is, yeah, so we talked about qualifications. Obviously, conflict of interest is something that you need to check as well, just in terms of making sure that there's no conflict of interest, that leadership team doesn't have some other conflicting arrangements outside of your workplace that might put your RTO at risk.
Yeah.
So, oh, sorry, Javier?
No, I think you're quite right at that. When we're talking a conflict of interest, it's also quite interesting to look at an internal conflict of interest, particularly for small, medium RTOs, when people sometimes are tasked to audit their own work. Well, that's itself a conflict of interest. Ensure that the compliance function has that kind of independence from the operational part. It is very important to avoid internal conflict of interest as well.
Question for you, Javier. This came up in a discussion recently, and I'm just be interested to get your opinion on. It's kind of falls under the guise of conflict of interest. So, and it's that internal training component, like you know, staff member wants to do you know, maybe a Cert 3 in business or whatever, and decides the organization decides to deliver that and assess that training, deliver that certificate. Is that considered a conflict of interest if you've got assessors, you know, who are colleagues of a employee within an RTO? What are your thoughts there in terms of perception or conflict of interest?
Yeah, that's a great question, actually, because it's quite common. Look, well, firstly, let's talk about legal. It is legal to train your own people. Now, it depends on the organization. If you have a system in place that you can ensure that staff member will not going to have access to, let's say, the marking guide of assessments that they going to undertake, and there is no way that they can take advantage of those links and relationships that have built with other staff members to benefit from that, then it's okay. But normally that happens in medium large organizations, you know, just to mention the public provided TAFE. So you can train your own staff and send it to another TAFE institute, or or find a different department that doesn't have those connections. In small organizations with 2 or 3 trainers only, that might be quite difficult. So it's very important that we take measurements, like if you're going to assess a staff member, perhaps getting
Some moderation
another
maybe.
person, yeah, another person going through the assessment evidence. And in some cases, I have a case where it's a very small RTO, family RTO, only 3 people working, and one of them will be issue one of the qualifications that they got on scope, and they got an external assessor to actually assess this person, and that could actually be a measure that can work with that. But in any case, ASQA will, and fair enough, will like to ensure that your staff member did not have any advantage, particularly access to marking guys.
Yeah, so obviously we'll be talking a lot more about risk in this session, but I guess, you know, that's something that you would want to identify as a risk and have some controls in place, maybe moderation or whatever it might be, right, to mitigate that risk, and be able to show that, you know, you've mitigated the risk of that conflict of interest potentially through making sure that, you know, multiple assessors assessing that that learner.
Yeah.
So yeah, these are the types of things that you need to really be looking at within your organization to, I guess, identify risks, challenges, problems, issues. We talked about fit and proper person. What about role? And we started sort of to touch on role suitability as well, making sure that our leadership team have the skills and experience. Is there anything else that you wanted to add to that advice that you wanted to add for making sure that your leadership team has the right, is suitable for their roles and have accountability as well within their roles?
Yeah, look, I think what you got in this slide is critical. It is important that roles are clear, the responsibilities and the accountabilities for each individual are very well documented and communicated to the people that work, not only at a leadership team, but actually for all staff. You know, sometimes we run exercise. It's just like we ask a person, hey, you tell me what are the different roles and responsibilities that you feel like you have in this organization, and we compare that with the job descriptions and the responsibilities listed there, and there are significant discrepancies. We live in a very dynamic world, and these teams evolve and change, and those accountabilities change quite often, and it might be challenging for RTOs to maintain that you know, documentation in places. So having those matrices could really help, and that's a critical part, because it is true, you know, compliance is everybody's responsibility, but when and sometimes we got a bit of overlapping in compliance responsibilities, but what these overlapping can do, and most of the time it does, is it create gaps that, you know, I thought that was your responsibility, you thought it was my responsibility, and at the end of the day nobody actually took responsibility.
Doing it.
And it's quite important that we actually got that quite documented there, very well documented. The second point
So,
about
yeah.
understanding, yeah, sorry.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. So I was just going to clarify there. So things like, yeah, obviously clear job descriptions, org charts. I think we'll talk a little bit later about a delegations register and how that might help. But yeah, I think some of the other things, you know, obviously there's that big focus in governance around the organization having a compliance culture, right? So I guess we need to make sure that our leadership team knows compliance back to front, right? So and we want to have evidence that they understand the standards, that they've been inducted to the standards, that they can talk around you know, the requirements across the standards, because without that, they really can't manage the organization. So your RTO obviously needs to be able to demonstrate that your leadership team have those skills and those capabilities to be able to you know, properly manage in that area. And some of the things that I think organizations and training organizations often forget about is often they have learning management systems. You know, it's really easy to create induction programs for management, for leadership, for staff, and keep those, you know, make obviously all those records of completion are then maintained in your LMS. And if it ever comes to a point where Ask was asking, you know, how do you make sure that your team understands, you know, the standards or compliance or whatever, you can take them straight to your LMS and show them the assessments that your team have undertaken, that they've completed, you know, training in all those different areas. And I think that's even better than, you know, a lot of people talk about a PD log. Well, a PD log's great, but, you know, imagine being able to show that, you know, they've completed this training program and this training program, and they've even done these assessments and showing that they actually have a proper understanding. I think that's, you know, better than any sort of PD log or even a piece of paper. You've actually got, you know, the real world proof that your staff have undergone those training capability checks. So I think that's something. Sorry, Javier, I cut you off, so I'll pass back to you.
No. You're right, and it's quite important what you're saying. And just to reinforce that, is Ask auditors will be having interviews with RTO staff, not only with trainers, admin people, and certainly managers. And part of the questions on those interviews will be about your knowledge about the standards itself, because you know those are the rules of the game, and if we don't understand the rules of the game that we play, well, what are the chances that we're going to play the game the right way? So it's important those metrics is also map the standards that affect each role. And then in those inductions, we actually explain and teach those people the rules that apply to the job that they perform based on the standards and the other legal instruments in the VET quality framework as well.
So would you map in the standards into that job description? Is that what you're talking about?
Definitely. Because we don't need everybody to understand all the rules, apart from the, you know, senior management and compliance manager. You know, if you got a marketing manager, it's quite important to understand the rules that affect the marketing function, but not the principle of assessments and rules of evidence, perhaps. So the trainer is important to understand the rules that affect the design, delivery, and assessment part of it. And the admin will understand the rules that affect all the standards that affect the job that they're doing. So you definitely, yes, that mapping in the job descriptions against the standards is quite important there as well.
Yeah, so taking that job description, taking that mapping against the standards, and then creating an induction program that covers those, you know, those requirements of the standards. Maybe that's something to put into place, so you can show that whole flow through, and yeah, have them complete some basic training and assessment through an induction or onboarding process into your RTO. I think that's great, and you know, it doesn't have to be for new staff as well. There's no time like the present. We can always upskill and, you know, improve the capabilities of our team at any point in time. And I think you definitely, if you haven't, I guess, got the evidence of that happening right now across all roles in your organization, it's something to probably put into place right now, as, you know, some kind of capability training across the standards that are relevant to different staff within your organization. That's a really great point, Javier, so appreciate that. And so there's Yeah, so I think probably the most important part of the leadership requirements is obviously in performance and oversight of the organization, and obviously accountability for the decisions that are made within that organization. How does that play out in a typical RTO, and what processes should be in place to, I guess, manage that performance oversight and activity within the organization, Javier?
Yeah, this is a critical one, and I think this is one of those that requires a culture change, even. In my experience, the last 10 years or longer, I have seen managers making a lot of decisions based on perceptions. And what these new standards are quite clear is you're going to make a decisions based on due diligence, that from internal audits, from validations, from the analysis of feedback that it comes from your own staff, trainers, industry, students, and use that data, analyze that data, and use that data to make the decisions. So informed decisions, and so that due diligence is a change that is required, and we haven't seen that happening for a long time. And we need to train our leaders to actually, even being able to interpret that data correctly.
And oh, sorry, carry
Yeah,
on.
no, go ahead.
Oh yeah, I was just going to say, yes, so really clear agendas, governance agendas. I would say specific in terms of what aspect of performance is going to be reviewed at those meetings, ensuring that the data is there for those leaders to be able to make decisions around performance. So that's, financial reports, I guess progression reports, and anything, and we'll go into that in a bit more detail, but making sure you've got those really clear agendas, and we'll look at one fully at the end of it, and documenting that, and obviously the outcome of those performance decisions being documented in minutes. Would these be some of the things that you'd be expecting to see, Javier?
100%. And I think another critical point here are benchmarks, because normally what happens when we start getting data about anything, but imagine in the performance of an RTO, it is a lot of that it comes from enrollment, satisfaction level for students, quality of learning materials, quality and compliance of assessments, compliance of trainers and assessors, your marketing material. It's a huge amount of data. Now, we can actually look at everything all the time. So how do we prioritize? Having benchmark that it tells you, hey, things are going well here, or we got potential problem, or we got in fact a problem that we need to rectify. So these benchmarks will tell us which areas are working correctly and which areas are not working correctly, and therefore will be our priority to act.
So
KPIs,
organizational KPIs, yeah.
correct, and that will become compliance KPIs that it will tell managers where to focus next.
Cool. I think I'll move a little bit quicker through staff roles and responsibilities, accountabilities, because there's a bit of fair amount of crossover from what we've been discussing to date with in relation to capability, clear job descriptions, and making sure you've got all those records to show that obviously staff have, know what their roles and responsibilities are, their capabilities. They have the capabilities to do their job. So the same principles apply, right, for your staff as do your leadership. And obviously it's your leadership's role to make sure that the staff that are employed within the organization have the right skills and capabilities. And where they don't, obviously there's a system in place for upskilling for instance, it's common that RTOs are going to employ administrators potentially that haven't had any exposure to the standards, and they're going to need to bring those new inducted employees up to speed with compliance relevant to their role, as we're discussing. So there's a lot of crossover in terms of the things that you need to be considering for your leadership team that directly apply to staff, and obviously professional development is a big part of that, and maintaining that culture of compliance across your entire organization. And I think as we move through, people get really familiar with the standards, that whole idea of a compliance culture within your organization is you're probably going to be hearing that a lot, because that's really what ASCA wants to see, that everyone understands the responsibilities, knows what they need to do within their role to comply with the standards. So yeah, just having clear records of that each and every individual staff member has the capability to do their role, and also has completed any necessary training to upskill across the compliance requirements within your organization. Is there anything else that you wanted to touch on from a staff capability perspective, Javier?
Yes. If I can share some ideas, we created what we call the RTO Workforce Capability Framework, and we try to be quite flexible so it can be adapted to any position or any role. So we find out that for any role we can organize the capabilities required as a core capabilities and professional capabilities. And I'm not going to go through the whole framework here, but just to give you a bit of an idea, within the core capabilities, we have communication, collaboration, ethical conduct, problem solving, and compliance. Within, and of course, each of those, we created 3 different levels, and for each level or domain, we actually put some performance indicators there to ensure that the people that work in those functions actually got the skills that are required. That can be used to test them, can be used to create a career pathway, can be used to identify professional development. The professional capabilities, though, we split in 2 different ones. One for trainers and assessors. Always you will focus more in the role of the trainer, of assessor, design and delivering, assessing, training, and the links and with the industry. And correct, industry engagement, and sometimes even industry leadership, when we get to the higher level in performance. But we also create some professional capabilities for non-academic staff that will look at it into project management, financial management, and administration, emotional intelligence, and so on. And I think adopting a integrated capability framework, it can help us to identify the needs to run an RTO, and it's not like a wish list that I wish I can have people with these capabilities. I think what is quite important is to understand that really is a need. So because if the staff that work for you do not have those skills, knowledge, and capabilities, well, you will simply will not be able to perform to the level that is required by the standards. And it's quite important that we now see not only the individual capabilities of each person in each role, but the overall capabilities when we add all of those,
Of the organization.
and identify whether we can do all the different functions that the RTO is expected today to do. One point that perhaps we didn't touch on this is these new standards are raising the bar in terms of governance to the level that you know, very corporate governance that basically is expected from a company that is at a really high corporate level in Australia, which it could hurt some small and medium RTOs to be able to demonstrate that level. So understanding the overall capabilities is quite an important part.
Yeah. So mapping the role to the individual to the skill, the role of the skills within that role, and then also mapping their capability against the standards as well. Yeah. So you can show that each staff member has that, and I guess that's where your performance reviews come into play, because obviously you can bring that into your employees' performance reviews and I guess assess how they're tracking against those different skill areas. And like you said, Javier, if you've got that matrix where you can start someone in a beginner, sort of at a beginner skill set, and then moving them up to intermediate and advanced. And I guess if you modularize that, you can have compliance modules at a beginner level, medium level, depending on the role. So you've got, I guess, a systemized process for being able to assess where staff are at in their, I guess, in their journey in terms of capability. And then I guess
the capability framework available, we've had someone ask.
Sorry, how many?
Where is the capability framework available? We've had someone ask on chat.
Our capability, workforce capability framework, we happy to share. So perhaps we can send it in the email, the follow-up email with the recording.
And I might mention it here. Insources and Javier's consultancy organization has created an amazing QMS, quality management system, and I think, is that like small part of that system, Javier?
Yes, correct.
Yeah.
It is one small part that is actually one section of the workforce policy. Because as I said, then we use that to base all the different skills required for every single role. Those three levels, we didn't actually leave it like a beginner, intermediate, advanced. We try to make it work with the operation of the RTO. So what it would be a beginner, we call foundational, because it's more skills required for the operational responsibilities to ensure that the person that is put into one position can actually do what the procedure and the work instruction says. The next level is more like an integrated level. So you are able now to use the systems and to guide other people in the systems that we use. Yeah. So get a more operational complex responsibilities. And the higher level is for managers. It's more developing those strategic skills that will allow you to really manage the RTO. And that's how we structure. But as I said, happy to send it to you so you can share with the people.
Amazing.
And get
Thanks,
a bit
Javier.
of
That's
how we
appreciate it. Okay, cool. So yeah, so basically overseeing that, and I think we've talked really well about having a really good structure to map those competencies and be able to show that you've got that oversight across the staff within your organization. So we'll skip over that one because I think we've pretty thoroughly covered that. So I'll just talk quickly about a delegations register. The standards make it really clear now that under performance indicator 4.2 that the roles and responsibilities of persons engaged by the organization are well understood, documented, ensuring accountable decision making. What that means is that you've got a system within your organization for making sure that whoever's making a decision within your organization has the authority to do that. For instance, if who is responsible in your organization for approving a training and assessment strategy, for instance, that needs to be clearly documented within your organization, and the delegations register that outlines who can do what and what approval statuses they have, or what authorizations they have within your organization is really critical. So yeah, the purpose of a delegations register is just to keep a track of the accountability and who can do what within the legal, financial, and operational boundaries helping your organization. So basically what that does is it maintains compliance with not only the standards, but legislation as well, and other regulatory frameworks. It prevents unauthorized actions and decisions or actions. And I think that's the most critical thing that ASC was wanting to make sure, that you just don't have a trainer and assessor signing off on a TAS and implementing that training and assessment strategy without having that level of authority and checks and balances in place. And that's really what governance is all about, having a structured process for ensuring things that happen in compliance with the organization's policies and procedures. And obviously to provide what the delegations register is, it just provides that audit trail of decision making. So for instance, when the say, and if I use the example of a TAS again, if your training and assessment strategy is you're having an internal audit, and if I'm auditing the TAS, one of the things I want to check is who approved that, and then is that person authorized, approved to sign off on that TAS, right? So it's down to that granular level of ensuring that the people making decisions within the organization are the people that the organization says have the authority to do that. Because really often, if these things aren't clear and there's no checks and balances, often things get sloppy, right? A new TAS is created, no one even reviews it, or if someone does review it, they're not necessarily the person that should have reviewed it, and suddenly there's a new either qualification added to scope and released, and a new training and assessment strategy underway without the necessary governance in place to make sure that it's compliant, it's ready to go, we've got everything that we need in place to deliver that course, and the strategy is right. So yeah, the delegations register, so things like who can sign funding contracts within your organization, right? Like, I'm sure should only be a couple of people in the organization that have that authority. Just make sure you've got a delegations log that says who can do that, who can approve internal audit reports or rectification actions, who can approve training and assessment strategies, as we talked about before, and even from a financial perspective, like who can authorize what payments and up to what level, right? So maybe training manager has a authority to approve payments up to 5,000. Maybe our finance manager has all that should be documented, so it's really clear, there's no question, and that way you've got an auditable document that you can go back against when you do your internal audit and check, oh, this happened, did they have approved, are they approved to do, oh yeah, they are, or we can give that's okay, we're following our procedures, we've got those governance steps in place to ensure that things aren't happening within the organization that shouldn't be happening, or by people that don't necessarily have the relevant authority. So that's something I think is pretty critical. I'll skip over this slide, but we will be sharing these slides with you. I'm just wary of time, and we've got a lot to get through, but within the slide deck, have a look. There's a delegations register example you could just create simply on a spreadsheet and keep track of all of that within your organization. So that slide there shows you what you could do quickly to create your own delegations register, and start keeping a track of, be able to show who does what, and that directly aligns with that 4.2 standard of being able to show that authority, who has authority to do what, and within your organization. Third-party monitoring is a big part of the governance requirements, and I think it's an area that is fraught with disaster if not managed or governed correctly. Javier, what are some of the risks there, and what are some of the checks and balances that RTOs need to have in place to make sure that, you know, their third-party arrangements comply with the new standards?
Yeah, you're right. This is a high risk, having a third party. Normally because the third party might not understand compliance requirements in the RTO space, which is a heavy regulated environment and requires an induction. But the first thing is, do your due diligence. You know, what are the skills, the knowledge, the efficiencies that third party will bring? What are the real benefits? And ensure that you do a scrutiny on that third party, similar to the scrutiny the ASCO will do on you, because the third party is actually working on your behalf, which means it's representing your organization. So the same level of compliance that you expect from your own organization is the same level of compliance that you expect from that third party. Sometimes here, there's certain things that we forget about it, that perhaps they're not that tangible. The due diligence will need to be around the structure, the governance structure, the resources, the capabilities, the finance, the management, but also how they will work with you. You know, are they compatible cultures that will be actually sync properly and work as a one organization? So first thing, do a due diligence, have an extensive and a relevant due diligence checklist. Ensure that the third party agreement is very detailed and explain the each party responsibilities and monitoring activities that will happen throughout the period. And then the period where that third party agreement is in place, and they have a way to monitor. You know, we don't expect that anyone's going to be perfect, and everybody can make mistakes. And you can go and do one of your monitoring activities, whether it's a validation or an internal audit, and there might be something that they're not doing right. But you need to have again benchmarks here, where it says, all right, well, if you haven't met those requirements, we're going to give you 3 months to fix it. In 3 months, if you still haven't met those requirements, we might need to suspend this agreement, give you 30 days to fix it. And if in 30 days you haven't fixed it, then we actually terminate the agreement. It's quite important that we got those in place. I have seen RTOs signing third-party agreements, and they're actually not doing the monitoring activities that are listed in the agreement, getting into significant compliance troubles.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, and I think that really it's an extension of your RTO, right? So we've talked about leadership and staff capabilities. The same rules apply for that third party. So everything that you have in place for your leadership team and your staff within your own organization, you need to have the same checks and balances for those third parties. And yeah, obviously, like Javier said, making sure that you know, they've been inducted to all your systems, processes, and understand all the evidence requirements that you need from them. And then you've got those monitoring systems in place, audits, compliance checks, and obviously, yeah, your validation and moderation sessions as well, to make sure that you're confident in the performance of that extension of yourself is at the same level that you would expect from your own organization, your own staff. So yeah, third-party monitoring, if you are dealing with third parties, yeah, you just need to make sure you've got really robust systems for applying the same expectations across those organizations as you have across your own, and have evidence of that. So yeah, we talked about ongoing monitoring and review. guys, just a quick plug. Javier's here from Insources, and Insources is also responsible for delivering a really amazing Australian VET conference that eSkilled has been lucky enough to be a part of for the last 3 years. We've been a diamond sponsor. It's a great event with speakers from regulators, experts across the VET sector, and yeah, basically lots of great conversations and connections and networking opportunities as well. I know I get a lot out of it. So he's kindly offered everyone a discount that's coming to this event. So I've put up a QR code there. The event's in March from the 12th to the 13th. Yeah, if you would like to come along, feel free to scan that QR code. And again, we'll be sending out this presentation. So if you don't get a chance to do it now, it'll be in that presentation as well. So thanks, Javier. Do you want to tell us anything quickly about what we can expect to see at that event?
Look, it's going to be a great experience. We've been doing this this is the 12th year in a row, and we'll be representatives from NASQA, the Job and Skill Councils, and leaders from the system. Obviously, topics from compliance, instructional design, delivering training, AI, and it's a great place to be with your peers. Something new this year, we're going to have also the Australian VET Conference Awards. There are around 15 different categories. So have a look at the website, and we all love to see many of you winning awards in that event.
I was just going to say, does that mean people here can nominate staff for awards?
100%, yes.
Okay, cool. Oh, well, yeah. If there's anyone in your organization that you think is noteworthy, guys, make sure you jump onto, is that the Australian VET Conference site that they do that?
Yes.
Okay, cool.
Choose the different categories and go ahead.
Awesome. Yeah, so an opportunity for your staff to get some recognition as well. Awesome. So moving on to one of my favorite topics is continuous improvement. Continuous improvement used to be in the standards, and then they took it out, and then they put it back in. It's now in the standards in more detail than it ever has been. I think it's actually really well documented, I think, this time in terms of what the expectations are for an organization. The standards really step out, the steps, and really that it follows your typical continuous improvement process, which is obviously the gathering and collecting and collating all of the metrics, feedback from stakeholders, and all the different entities or people or organizations that your organization comes into interaction with. Obviously, your students being at the center of that, and organization staff, industry and staff, analyzing that information. So, how well are you going with your delivery? What's your completion stats like? What do your staff say about your organization? What do students say about your organization? What does industry think about your training? All that stuff, getting all that important information back, bringing that to your governance meetings, and we'll talk about that a bit later in the governance agenda, but obviously, and then making informed decisions based on that data, and then feeding, obviously making improvements based on the learnings and insights from those analytics and reporting, and obviously implementing those improvements in your organization, and then obviously feeding back and starting that process again. So I love continuous improvement. As a CEO in our organization, we're not an RTO, but I certainly think these principles are front and center of everything we do at eSkilled. So I think it's really great to see them really clearly stepped out in the standards, because to me it just makes it much easier to know what you've got to do and how you've got to do it. And really, to be honest, I think that the continuous improvement process is really the basis for governance in your organization as well. So let's have a look at it in a bit more detail. So Javier, the first step obviously is that collecting information, and obviously the standard 4.4 steps out who you've got to collect from. Do you want to just talk us through that a little bit?
Yeah, sure. So yes, there is the collection of data from students in those compulsory surveys, but also the surveys that you can create internally are very important. I think one of the issues here with people collecting these evidence is again the lack of having a benchmark. So if you're using scales, 1 to 5, okay, what is acceptable? And is a 4 out of 5 or 4.3 or whatever you're going to decide, and not just react to comments. I see people collecting 200 surveys from students and only acting upon one person that make one comment that didn't like that trainer because he was rude. However, not looking into the 200 actually answers to the other questions that can give you very interesting trends. We're gonna go, obviously being more objective in both. Also, quite important to get information from your staff, because they are the ones using your systems, your resources, your facilities, and dealing with your students, and using that information. Employers seems to be something that many RTOs are struggling with getting feedback from them, and through that survey that is prescribed, since I believe 2007, the AQTF. So here the link is to ensure that we are talking with employer their language, and kind of induct them a little bit into those surveys that they might not be very user friendly, and connecting with the industry through those different options of events and meetings, and why not inviting them to see what your students are able to do is very important in their continuous improvement, in order to have your fingers in the pulse of how you perform it. Most RTOs do that. The problem that I see when I audit RTOs is how they close the loop, how they show that the changes and updates in the systems and the practices are linked to the data they collected and analyzed. And I think here perhaps the problem is more about the tools. Again, as we say early, is a lot of information coming up, and how do we deal with this in a spreadsheet or in different way, manually or semi-manually. And it's important to adapt a system that it helps you to do that analysis easier, and to understand trends, and to make decisions, and those decisions back up by the information and the analysis that you done on that information.
Yeah, things like, I think performance reports that, I guess there's lots of sort of simple metrics I think that you want to be pulling out of whatever systems you're using, right? Like for instance, what's your retries on assessment, right? Like how many attempts? Have you got any assessments that have every time, average reattempts on that assessment, or on the assessments for a particular unit 2 or 3 times? That's an indication that you've got an area for improvement, right? Like ideally students are getting that being able to get through that assessment and be competent first or second go, ideally, right? So you've either got a problem in your training and in the training and preparing students for that assessment, or maybe there's some problems in that tool that students are getting confused, or the instructions aren't clear, or whatever it might be. But using the data that you've got and being able to, but I think the key is being able to show that that's systematic in your process. So, governance is all about systematic, right? So again, bringing those reports to those meetings and sitting down and actually having a look at what that data is telling you, and then, making decisions that obviously going to improve the training within your organization, or the finances within your organization, or the operations within your organization, the compliance within your organization. So, completions reports, all that critical data, obviously feedback from your students, feedback from your staff. And like Javier said, you've got to have a way to benchmark it. So, what are your expectations first of all, and then you want to have reporting about how you're tracking on that. And yeah, that just means making sure that you've got good tools and systems in place for collecting, collating, and gathering that information and reporting that back to your leadership team. It's really critical. And then those reviews should be systemized in your governance meetings. So obviously the final part of that, Javier, is the implementation. And I think this is, sometimes the bit that also gets missed, or if it's done, it's completed, it's often not well documented. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. And one statistic as an auditor that I normally look at it is how long it takes that cycle. How many of those initiations of a change actually become a change, how long it takes for an action that has been proposed and sometimes already been approved to be implemented, it takes to actually being implemented. And ASCO will be looking at those really close, because it tells you commitment to compliance, commitment to continuous improvement, because that continuous improvement is actually what it connects compliance with quality. We improve because we want to be better, not only because we want to be compliant. So I believe is an area of challenge, and I do understand there's a lot of competing priorities for RTOs, but it's something that we do need to give it enough time and resources, because you won't improve a learning material without putting resources into it. And so that closing the loop is an important part of it.
Yeah, and I think you hit the nail on the head in terms of prioritizing. When you're adding improvements into your compliance, your continuous improvement register, you want to be giving that item a risk rating, right? So when it comes to time for your monthly governance meetings, or your monthly exec management meetings, and you're going to be looking at your continuous improvement, and if you've got 25 things in there, that can be overwhelming, right? Like there's often, particularly if you're a smaller organization with less resources, you're not necessarily going to get 25 things done between now and the next month, right? So by having a risk rating in your risk register, in your continuous improvement register, that makes it really easy to make a decision on what are your top 5 or 6 things that you're going to be able to get done between this meeting and the next meeting, and making sure you're prioritizing anything that's high risk. I think I have, and I might just, I'll skip forward. So obviously, because we are getting a little bit behind in time too, but we want to be making sure that we're monitoring that what we implement. That's really really important in the standard. So ASCO now requires you not only to implement, but after you've implemented, to go back and check that what you've implemented has actually made an improvement. Yeah. So make sure that in your risk register, or however you track, sorry, not your risk, I keep saying risk register, in your continuous improvement register, or whatever system you're using for tracking your continuous improvement, you're also keeping a track that you've actually systematically gone back and checked that you've got the improvement that you expected. For instance, you updated an assessment tool because you had terrible, reattempts. Did your reattempts drop? And record how you reviewed that and how you made the decision that yes, it's better, and we're running with that, right? We've achieved that improvement and we're moving on. So that's something that is front and center in these standards that wasn't in the past, and it's written in black and white in the standards. So just make sure you've got that, that process and the evidence of doing that process in place. So yeah, I just wanted to jump to here. So this is an example of a risk rating. Again, you'll get the slides. So, if you haven't got a risk rating in your matrix at the moment, if you want to refer back to these slides, you could add a simple rating like this. It just makes it easy to filter what's in your continuous improvement, and then, focus on, catastrophic, major, moderate. And then obviously once you've got through those, or hopefully you don't have any of those, but, we do from time to time, things happen. Once we've cleared anything in those, levels 3, 4, and 5, and then we can start looking at our 1s and 2s. Yeah. I wanted to sort of talk about some practicalities in terms of continuous improvement, and because the standards really move it from, a static continuous improvement, from a static thing to a living, breathing, real thing, and how that, because it's so wide-reaching, continuous improvement, like they talk about continuous improvement across your entire organization, and being able to demonstrate that. It's just important now that we've got the necessary systems in place to be able to show that we actually have got systems and processes in place for being able to demonstrate continuous improvement across the whole organization. It sounds like a big thing. So I think spreadsheets are a challenge to stay on top of this stuff, mainly because it's a static thing often. It's not going to tell you when you haven't done something. It's not going to, it's hard to attach evidence into it. And I think it's limited in its capacity to be able to show that you've got a systematic continuous improvement system. So what I wanted to show you, and by the way, there's a number of other continuous improvement or systems out there, but I just wanted to demonstrate how we're helping RTOs manage continuous improvement within the eSkilled student management system. So I'll just share my switch screens for a second, and I'll take you in and I'll show you how we do that. Okay, are you seeing my browser now, guys? Javier, can you see my browser?
Yes.
Yeah. Yes. Okay, cool. So in our compliance section in our eSkilled student management system, we have what looks similar to a continuous improvement register, but it does a lot more than that. But before we get to the continuous improvement register, obviously a lot has to happen before you even start looking here, right? Like the first part that we looked at of continuous improvement is collect, collate, and analyze the data within your organization, right? So what we've done within our system, and because to be honest, I think to meet this requirement, it's so broad reaching, you have to make it easy, right? In terms of collecting and collating that data, you want to make it easy. So we went back after these new standards, which we already had systems in place, but we went and made it easier for everyone, all the stakeholders, to be able to provide feedback. So for instance, on the main menu here, you can see a feedback button, yeah? And this feedback form makes it really easy for any staff member, right, to go, oh, there's a problem with this tool, add it here, upload, attach the assessment tool or whatever it might be, submit, and that goes straight into your continuous improvement register. The same feedback form exists in the student portal. So a student finds a problem, one of your assessment tools or something to do with your training, or they don't like your venue or whatever it might be, they can literally, from their student portal, use the same feedback form and provide feedback for continuous improvement. They can also add complaints. They can also add appeals directly from their student portal. and all of that information, so trainers, everyone, right? So the same thing in company portal, so industry or your industry partners, employers, in eSkilled, they all have their own portal. We call them company portals, but in there they've got the same feedback form. So it just makes it easy to collect feedback from everyone, whether it's industry, employers, students, staff. And the great thing is it doesn't come into an inbox or an email, it comes into your continuous improvement register. So, you know, and then when we talk about systematic compliance or systematic governance, this system can then either send an email to your whoever's responsible for overseeing compliance in your organization. So it can send them an email, or it could send them a task to review that entry. And that person can then simply jump in and they can look at that, they can put a risk rating on it. If it's critical, they might even just go and assign it to someone straight away. So basically within this continuous improvement register, yeah, we can track who it's reviewed by, what date, whether that's approved. So again, that delegation thing, that governance thing, we can see who's approving what. We can see the expected completion time. And we talked about implementation. So often, you know, with spreadsheets, often what happens is they get logged, and people are often quite good at logging stuff, but, you know, it's the actions that really matter now under the standards. So you can set your expected completion dates, and then if that's not completed by that date, the system can automatically notify whoever. So through automations, you can choose who gets notified about what, and they're tapped on the shoulder to say, hey, you know, this improvement's not completed by the expected due date. Maybe you need to follow up or do whatever you need to do to make sure that it gets done. You've got your statuses here. And again, all these statuses are managed by automation. So for instance, when that staff member or student or company adds a continuous improvement register, the system can automatically send them a notification, say, hey, thanks for, you know, sharing your feedback. We've got your continuous improvement suggestion, and, you know, we'll be doing whatever with it, right? So you can automate that communication, but not only that, that communication is all logged within your continuous improvement register, so you can show not only did you implement it, but, you know, you've communicated that it's been done to the student, and you can track the communication history that's related to that event. You can assign tasks. Yeah, so I can just simply from this item assign a task, but you can automatically assign tasks as well, e.g. no one touches it, and use automations to assign tasks, or manually. The nice thing about compliance tasks is they sit here, but you can go to your tasks menu within compliance and see any outstanding or overdue tasks that need to be completed within your organization. So when we start to talk about governance, at your governance meetings, you know, we can come in here and we can go and open up our filters, and we can go and select anything that's got a catastrophic risk rating, right? Oh, we don't have anything. That's good. What about major? Oh, we've got this major one. And oh, but it's completed. That's great. Yeah. So you've got that really simple. The analytics is there. You can quickly filter and find data and understand what's going on, and things that need to be done, things that need to be prioritized within your organization through your continuous improvement register. The complaints. So another thing that is specifically made as a requirement in the standards is that you can show how the information that you get from appeals and complaints informs your continuous improvement processes, right? So within our system, with complaints and appeals, I can link this. So basically I go, oh, okay, we've got a problem here. Yep, this person's complained about whatever it might be. There's never any, there's no paper in the printer. It's not. But what I can do is I can link this so I can go and link it to an existing improvement item that I have, or I can go and create a new item in my continuous improvement register and push this this complaint, so the findings from this complaint, into my continuous improvement register. So the learnings from this complaint are automatically recorded in my continuous improvement register, and I can show that through the source here that the source of this continuous improvement register item is a complaint. So when ASQA comes to audit you, they go, oh, well, how do you use your complaints to show continuous improvement within your organization? You can filter by complaints, you can filter by appeals, you can filter by any option within the system. So that's to me, that's what systematic continuous improvement looks like. You can show the source, you can show any external source as well. So say you've got feedback from another source that's not the system, you can also add that into the source here, so you can filter by that. Industry engagement is all collected and collated within the system and pushed across. So any learnings from our industry engagement, we can push into our continuous improvement register. We can show how the insights that we gain from industry are implemented within our organization, and we can show that they're actually implemented. Yeah, which is, again, I think a lot of people are doing the industry engagement, but they just don't have the systems and process for tracking it through the system and showing the implementation on the other end. So what a system like this does is it connects all the dots from data collection, collation, all the way through to implementation, and then review and approval as well. So all of that governance stuff is covered off just through having a really good system, which, like I was saying earlier, I just don't think it's easy to do that through spreadsheets. It means if you're using spreadsheets, you've got to have about 10 other, you've got to have email trails and 20 other tools to be able to try and track and trace and show that compliance. So I'll switch back to our feed now, because we are running out of time. We're going a little bit over time, guys. Apologize for that. It's a big topic.
While you're doing that, I had a quick question come through asking whether many RTOs use RACI charts to outline their responsibilities, authority, and who needs to be consulted and informed about changes.
I might pass that one to you, Javier. You've probably got more experience with RTOs.
Yeah. Look, I don't think so. That's my answer. Perhaps that's something that could be suggested and maybe even forward to ASQA to be published as a best practice, but I don't think it's used.
But it sounds like a great tool. Yeah.
It is a great tool. It is a great tool. Perhaps that's something that we are learning in the way that we're interacting with ASQA lately. If you do feel the way you're doing, it actually represents best practice, please go ahead and communicate that to ASQA, because they can, if they agree with you, they can take it and publish it, and we all benefit. So great question, or I would say great suggestion, actually.
Okay, so getting back to the standards, I guess, and governance with the standards, and I left risk management to last, and now we covered it a bit earlier because we are running slow on time, running late on time. So obviously, managing risk is really at the heart of governance and the standards, and it's a big topic unto itself. The standards make it, really clear that from a governance perspective, an RTO needs to be aware of risk. They need to have a documented process for assessing risk within their organization, and be able to demonstrate how they have implemented or controls or mitigated the inherent risks within their organization to reduce, obviously, the residual risk or the overall risk once they've applied those controls. So what that means is that, yeah, those oversights, those monitoring, that review, and the implementation of those improvements, you've got a way to evaluate the effectiveness of those to show that you are reducing the risk within your organization. Javier, we probably won't do the slide thing, but like obviously critical takeaways for managing risk or risk management within an organization and ensuring that the risk management system complies with the new standards.
Yeah, as you say, it's a core element. It's not new in the regulations. It was actually funny enough in the first AQTF, and then they took it, and now it's back. Look, the first thing is just define the risk in your own context, because that shows that you really understand what risk is. And not every RTO is dealing with the same risk, even though we are regulated with the same regulation, but we work in different contexts.
So that would be like a SWOT. That would be like a SWOT analysis, right? Like because it clearly states that it has to be relevant to your organization. So you can't grab someone else's risk policy and apply it in your organization. Because the standards say you have to have looked at your environment, your organization, your own financial status, and all of that, and evaluated and documented, right?
Correct, because if you're delivering a unit of competency that leads to a license, so it will be different stakeholders that if you're delivering a business qualification, and those stakeholders will have different expectations for different industries and so on. So you'd really need to understand the risk within your context. Yeah. I think a second point is to communicate.
Things like working with, so just on, you know, some of the obviously critical risk factors, working with children, you know, if you're delivering in things like aged care, early childcare, like those environments are obviously super high risk, obviously very public at the moment, and obviously anything in ASQA's annual report, which is a focus, obviously should be front and center if that's, you know, within the scope of your RTO in your risk register, because they would expect to see it there, given that they've published that it's a risk area for them anyway. So a really solid process for identifying SWOT analysis, go across every or your entire org function and document all those potential risks, get everyone in the room.
And risks associated to your business model, to delivery mode, they need to be clearly identified. So that shows that you have an understanding of that risk. But obviously that's not enough. The next point will be to communicate it with you know, internally and externally, in order to analyze the potential impact and determine what is the best way to mitigate the risk. Now, I think there are a few points here. You know, regulatory obligation and compliance, that's a risk that ASQA clearly wants us to be upfront in and understanding how do we deal with that. Essential, the outcomes of our training. So quality training and assessment outcomes, the risk associated to not achieving that, operational risk at different steps of your operation, financial risk, reputational risk, strategic reputational risk that can damage your RTO, the risk of dealing with people under 18, and is very serious in the new standards. And important here is documented your analysis of that risk and the different measures that you're going to use to mitigate, and ensure that those are communicated and used, those mitigation measurements. And obviously that's a dynamic process, and once you put those mitigation processes, the risk will go down, hopefully, if it's done properly, and potentially we can improve those methods and actions.
Yeah, and yeah, and on this slide we've got some, I guess just some performance things that you can do in terms of, yeah, obviously making sure you've got all that financial forecasting and financial viability stuff sorted from a financial risk, making sure you've got proper and adequate reporting, either monthly or I think it should be monthly to your exec management, so they've got the relevant information that they need to understand the current performance of the business and make the necessary judgments and decisions that they need to, I guess, evaluate risk and mitigate risk, and keeping a documentation of all of those reviews. Obviously, Javier talked about child safety. Obviously, that's, if you're dealing with children, you need to have really clear policies and procedures, monitoring of those risks within your organization, so I would say, yeah, have a look. I would recommend looking at some kind of risk management register or some kind of risk management system that clearly tracks all the identified risks, the controls that you've applied to those risks, and make sure that at those governance meetings that you're reviewing those controls and making sure those controls are still adequate. And that could be anything. It could be cyber threat, it could be working with children, it could be or compliance with the standards, obviously a major threat to your RTO. So anything and everything should be in there. So nobody loses sight of the things that they need to, and make sure that those, just like we talked about in the continuous improvement register, that you're giving those risks a rating, and obviously applying a residual risk rating after you add your control, right? So you can assess, okay, I've added my control, now we believe the risk is at this. And then when you're monitoring again, you can see, okay, have there been any incidents? Are there any issues? Is the control effective? And documenting that, the process for reviewing those risks within your organization is super critical. So those governance meeting minutes are more important than ever. Don't ever miss those. You need to show that you're doing it. What I might do, we've pretty much hit time. In fact, we've gone 4 minutes over time. I was going to take you through a risk management system. Can I get an indication of who's willing to stay on and have a look at that? Maybe you can just add some comments in the feedback if you're interested. I totally understand if you do need to go now. I've got a few thumbs up there. Okay, thumbs up is great. Lots of thumbs up. Okay, we might continue on. If you do have to leave, I apologize that we've gone over time. It's a big subject and probably we should have allowed 2 hours. But yeah, I think having some practical demonstration will be helpful. So I'll get in and do that. And if you do have to leave now, we will be sending out the video. So feel free to catch up on the video. And we will send you the slides and everything, because there's a lot of information in those slides and a lot of evidence that, suggestions for all of this stuff. So you've got a lot more detail within those slides that you can take back to your organization. Okay, so let's jump in and we'll have a look at a risk management system. And how that, I guess, helps you keep track of risks within your organization. Okay, so can everyone see my browser? Can you just give me a nod if you can see that, Javier? All good? Yeah. Okay, so yeah, so eSkilled's in the process, and to be honest, I was hoping we'd have it completed for this webinar, but we're not quite there. But it will be implemented within our system, within that compliance area in our system very shortly. I would say within the next 2 weeks. It's very close. We're just putting it through its last quality and assurance testing. But what we've looked at is trying to design a system that obviously makes it easy for you to identify those risks across your organization and make it easy to see any high risk problems at a glance. any reviews coming up, because under the standards, you need to show how you review your risks and controls that you've got in place. So you need a way of showing that you've got a system to do that. Any risks that you've got sitting here in this register that you haven't yet applied any controls to, because obviously that's you don't just want to be logging your risks, you want to be making sure you're mitigating your risks as well. And ideally, you've got lots showing up in this controlled risk section here. So basically, the idea of a risk register, and again, through that SWOT analysis where you go through and you identify those risks, that's where you would enter those risks into your risk register. In a risk, the way that a risk management system works, and our system will automatically do this for you, basically the first thing you do is apply an inherent risk, or you say this risk is a medium level risk, and within our system we give you a definition of what each of those risks is, like the one that I showed you on the slide before. So if this has an inherent risk of 12, and then the next thing is you need to apply your control. So if I just go here, I can add a new risk here, or once I'm inside my risk, I can add a control. And the control might be, for instance, if I've got staff working with children, everyone's got to have a blue card, right? So we've got a system for checking, everybody has their blue card before they're, allowed to work with children, for instance, right? So that might be my control. I would, that's a reasonably effective control. So then you can, within that control, you can say how effective you think that control is, and that will reduce your overall risk. And in some cases, really high risk areas, you might need multiple checks and balances, right? You might need multiple controls. So you can apply a number of controls to any risk to be able to show how your organization is mitigating those risks. And I would recommend, if you have any high risk areas you really want to be thinking about, you might need multiple levels of controls and checks and balances to stay on top of those. When you're adding a risk, you select the category, and again, in the standards, it talks about your risk management system covering your entire operations of your RTO. So you want to make sure that whether it's operational, strategic, or compliance, or technology, or reputation, you've really analyzed and looked at those risks across your entire organization. Ownership is also a really important thing. Who's responsible for that risk? Who's responsible for reviewing it and making sure that that risk is mitigated or controlled. So this is where we talked about the likelihood and the impact. So if that happened, what would be the impact on the organization? And then obviously, is this risk active? If it's no longer a risk, you can change the status of that to closed or mitigated, or basically keep a track of where that's at. Ideally, it's mitigated or closed or deferred. So you want to add a review date, and just like in our continuous improvement system, our system automations will make sure that that you don't miss any reviews, because obviously missing a review is a non-compliance. So you want to make sure that prior to any review, somebody's getting a reminder to say, hey, don't forget, we've got to check this risk and make sure that control is still active, and we can log update this to say that it's been done and it's reviewed. Obviously, the other critical thing is mapping those risks to the standards, so the different performance indicators across the standards. So whatever it might be, just choose that for now. This is just a dummy system, by the way. It's not the actual system. That's why there's no standard 8.6. And then we want to add evidence, right? So basically what we want to do is add any evidence of that control being implemented, and that's the most important. You know, if you don't have the evidence, then it doesn't exist, right? So you need to be able to show, if maybe you've got a process document that ensures, you know, you do all those blue card checks like we talked about before, or you've got whatever systems or processes you've got in place that are evidence that you've got that control in place and that it's working, you want to add into your risk register. So when your executive team is at their governance meetings, they can go through and have a look at this stuff and decide, is that control, is that adequate for this risk? You know, maybe we should be doing something a bit more to make sure that, you know, we've got that fully covered. So the idea is, yeah, we can go through and log all of our risks that we've identified in our SWOT analysis. We can see what standards they relate to. We've got a full documented history of the controls that we have in place. We've got the system telling us, hey, you know, you've got critical risks, or so if you've still got something at critical, then it's likely that you haven't mitigated that risk within your organization, right? You need to look at it. Yeah, you've got reviews coming up, and yeah, you've got risks without controls. You know, you wouldn't want to see any numbers in these things. So ideally, everything's showing over here in green, and you've got that, you know, that comfort, the visual comfort that, okay, our risk management system is in place and it's working. And then at your governance meetings, on your agenda, your governance team, your executive management team have an agenda item to go through and look at these risks and reevaluate these risks and make sure that they're effective and they're doing the controls are doing the job that they need. As new risks are identified, it's a living, breathing thing. You don't have to wait for a SWOT analysis. Obviously, you've got your continuous improvement register that's also, you know, a live collection of, like I showed you before, it's collecting feedback and problems and incidents or whatever it might be. There's risk ratings associated with those. Anything that's, you know, a reasonable risk should be also going from your continuous improvement register into your risk management system. So you've got, again, so you're closing that loop, and all that feedback, you can show that the feedback that you're getting from all the stakeholders also feeds back into your continuous improvements, into your risk management system, and you can show the connection of how that's happening. And again, in the standards, it makes it clear that your items from risks identified through continuous improvement should be going into your risk, you know, handled through your risk management system. So in this risk management system, you know, we can quickly get to any critical risks through filters, just making it easy, because if you've got a lot of risks in there, you know, you don't want to be scanning through the whole thing to find anything that's, you know, problematic, anything that's overdue or needs a review. We can just quickly filter to find those things, so we can do those reviews in your governance meetings or whatever it might be. So it just makes it easy for your management team to get to whatever needs to be looked at or reviewed quickly and easily. And you can see there's a whole bunch of filters to get really granular if you want. If you've got a lot of, you know, if you're a large organization, you might have a lot of risks, so you want to be able to filter that down and get to the information that's relevant. For instance, because you've got it categorized, financial risks, you know, can be reviewed in finance meetings, right? Whereas, you know, operational risks are probably going to be reviewed in operational meetings. So by categorizing those risks, you can easily within those meetings get to the information that you need for those departments that are responsible for those areas. So yeah, ownership is really important, and that's outlined in the standards. So make sure that your risks always have an owner assigned. So you've got that clear authority delegation within your organization. So that's a quick summary of a risk management system. In the not too distant future, I would say 2 weeks, eSkilled will be releasing this into our production system. So if you want to look out for that, you can always book in a tour with one of our team, and we can show you that in the real system once it's live. Jumping back to this one here we go. Sorry, just switching screens. So yeah, that pretty much wraps up the governance. I've got an agenda here. I won't go through it all because again, it'll probably take us another 20 minutes to get through. But we will share the slides with you for this presentation. Do have a look at it. The intention isn't that this governance meeting is one agenda. This agenda is one meeting, but you know, you can have multiple meetings where these things are reviewed. But I do recommend when you get the slides sent to you, do have a look at those and make sure that your own internal governance meetings are looking at all of these risks and compliance oversights and performance reports and you know, different areas of the standards that are being reviewed at a governance level. If you do all of this, you put all this into place through your governance meetings, you're gonna naturally meet most of the things that we've discussed here today, because through these reports, through this information, your governance team is gonna have the information that they need to make the relevant decisions and make sure those meetings, the meeting minutes are recorded, so you've got evidence of that happening, and that's the most critical thing. And obviously we've got AI for us to do that for us now, right? Like, I don't know about you guys, but no one does meeting minutes in our organization anymore. With AI, it all just happens, right? So you know, and I would say on that note, AI is going to help with all this stuff, right? AI is, if you're not looking at, you know, what AI capabilities are there to help you assist with this systematic compliance, getting information from one system to another, or doing that analysis. AI is amazing at doing analysis and reading the numbers and telling you what the numbers tell you. Feed your financial reports into AI and get it to tell you, you know, the performance of the business. And, you know, these types of things, you know, are so much easier now. You needed a team of people to get that kind of analytics in the past. You know, now we can literally feed stuff into AI and get it to tell us what the numbers say, what the problems are, what the concerns might be, and AI is something that we're working on across eSkilled systems as well. So we'll be, you know, in the future be able to show you, you know, the system will be able to tell you, hey, you know, you might want to look at these things in your continuous improvement register because they're overdue or whatever. But yeah, right now there's a lot of AI tools that can do a lot of this governance stuff for you and make it much easier. So definitely look into that. So yeah, continuous improvement, looking at every aspect of the business through these governance meetings is going to be critical. That kind of brings us to questions. Before we get to questions, I'll just let you know that if you want to have if you haven't yet discovered eSkilled student and learning management systems and you'd like to do a demo, you can go to our website. I've also put Javier's website here that you can scan with the QR code as well. And like he said, he's got an amazing quality management system that pretty much will guide you on all these governance requirements step by step. If you just, you know, complete the pack that he gives you, you know, you literally will have most of the policies and procedures, and then the next step, I guess, is just to make sure that you're implementing them. And that's where eSkilled can really help you out, because we've got the systems that can systemize all that for you and, you know, make light work of what would typically be difficult tasks, gathering information from all these different sources and analyzing it. So yeah, feel free to book in a demo if you want to see eSkilled system. I haven't even got into the performance reports and dashboards that obviously would also assist in governance. We just don't have enough time. Could be here for hours. So yeah, we do have, we're offering everyone a 15% off for your first year subscription with eSkilled RTO software too. So look out for that. We'll send you an email. And I believe Javier is also going to send you some information about his QMS, and I think he's